Student loans is sort of like this exercise bike here. It's easy when the setting is on low and you have less student loans, but the second you start getting some more, right? You start setting that setting a little bit higher, it just becomes a little tougher. And the more you have, the more difficult life is after you have those student loans. And I know it may seem weird that I'm doing this and telling you about the video, but I really need to get this cardio in. Anyway, that's your introduction, and watch the rest of the video for more information about student loans and how I graduated with $0 in student loans. Can you imagine if I did the entire video while I was biking? That would have been torturous for me and both the viewers too. Moving on to the topic of student loans. It's a difficult topic, especially if you're a high school student, meaning it's very confusing and all you know is that these loans are bad but can be good. If you're already a college student, then you know these loans are brutal depending on your major and what your career progressions look like. The average amount of student loans in America is anywhere between $30,000 to $40,000. Having student loans actually sets you back financially in terms of buying a home, buying a car, because you are contributing a significant amount of your income toward student loans, and likely you're paying it off over a 10-year period. And once you put that on top of everything else, do you really have any money left over to save? Most of America probably doesn't. It's not fun to come from a low-income environment and have no college savings. And my situation and how I approached it can be very different from your approach to it, but hopefully it'll give you some insight into my process and what I did there. I'm gonna talk about the steps that I took to basically graduate with $0 in student loans. I think it's very important to emphasize that I do come from a low-income background and we had no savings for college. So that will allow me to leverage some of these programs, but also because of the location I'm at, the state and city location contributed greatly to what financial aid programs I have access to and the institutions that I could go to. Make sure you fill out FAFSA. That's a big thing, especially if you're a college student and you're already doing it. If you're a high school student, first time you're hearing about it, but you absolutely have to fill out FAFSA so that you qualify for financial aid from the various federal and state level programs. There are federal programs such as Pell. For those families who have low income, you do have to apply for it every year, but if you fill out FAFSA, it should make it easier. And then after federal programs, there are state level programs. So for New York State, there was TAP, right, which was the Tuition Assistance Program. Now TAP was a little bit unique, and your state may or may not have a similar tuition assistance program, and you should definitely look into it. The goal was to basically help those who had low income. With TAP and Pell, basically my tuition was for the most part paid for, right? But on top of that, I had scholarships as well. Your financial aid office, your guidance counselor, all of these people will tell you apply for scholarships. And realistically, tell me, when you Google for scholarships, what do you see? Do you see a lot of scholarships that you can apply for? And if you apply to all of them, do you get them? Because in my experience, scholarships are very difficult to come by and very competitive. Fortunately for me, I qualified for the Macaulay Scholarship, which paid my tuition in full. My approach to scholarships was a little bit different. I didn't just Google scholarships and find all the scholarships and apply to them. There's a scholarship for everything. The trick, in my opinion, is to apply for scholarships that were more selective among the participants who can apply. The scholarships that I applied for were strictly for Macaulay students. Right, so the pool of people who can apply are already limited. The goal is to eliminate as much competition as possible so you can increase your chances of getting that scholarship. Talk to your financial aid office and figure out what scholarships are a little more unique or a little more selective. Some of them may depend on the major you're studying for, right, or the career you're pursuing, or if you're thinking about the public sector or private sector work. Right, all those scholarships are completely based on your income level, completely based on the state and city you're at. A good example that we hear a lot about in New York State at least is the Excelsior Scholarship. And these scholarships that have a lot of limitations, if you fit those qualifications, it's much easier to get in versus a scholarship that everyone can apply to because the competition pool is huge. For me, living at home wasn't an issue, and that really made it easier to graduate with $0 in student loans because I didn't have to borrow money to pay for living expenses. Rent in New York City is insane, which contributed to the fact of my family not having any savings for college. You have all of your money going toward just surviving every day. It's hard to save money for your children to go to college. If you are able to and your family allows it, I would say consider staying at home. I know it's not always the most ideal environment. I know a lot of people who think, I don't want to stay at home. I want to go out there. I want to live. If you go out there and you enjoy college for 4 years and then you come back and you have student loans for 10 years, who's really losing out here, right? Sometimes you can't avoid it depending on your goals, your professions, and so on, and what you want to do in life. The most important thing here is doing the math. The math was really important when it came to selecting which college I wanted to attend. I wanted to make sure that it was affordable. Right? So I looked up tuition. Right? How much did it cost to go to this college if I had no financial aid, if I had no scholarships? The costs were pretty insane, especially for a private institution. Some public places were also insane, depending on if it's out-of-state tuition or in-state tuition. Once you know how much it costs to attend, you know you don't have enough money for it, so your only option is to take out loans. And if you're taking out loans, chances are you're going to be looking at interest rates. The lower the interest rate, the better. You basically can't control interest rates. You're at the mercy of the government or these private institutions. And once you have that, you can go ahead and crunch the numbers, right? Put it into a student loan calculator, figure out how much money am I going to have to pay at the end of my 4-year period. And does that number look realistic to you? When you look at the career that you want, will it make enough money to pay for your student loans plus live your life? If it doesn't do that, then maybe you either want to select a different career path or you want to go to a more affordable institution. And now that brings up the next topic. If you can, you should really consider a public institution. For me, I went to Baruch College, and Baruch was a public institution. It was one of the CUNYs in New York City. The whole point of a public school is that it's affordable. If you have enough financial assistance, then possibly it can be free in a sense. Right? If your financial assistance programs pays for all of the tuition, then you're in luck. It's free. The trick with these public schools is that not every state or city has affordable public schools on a relative scale. They're probably more affordable than private institutions, but it doesn't mean that they're as affordable as other schools in other states. So it really will depend on where you are and what your restrictions are in terms of relocating for college. Now we look at the tuition for Baruch. It's exceedingly low when you compare it to other institutions, either public or private. I want to be clear that my process for not having student loans may be very different and may not even be applicable to your case because so much of it is dependent on various factors. You may not be able to replicate it, but hopefully you can take some learnings from it and at the very least, reduce the amount of student loans you will have. Luckily for me, I had a full scholarship through Macaulay. If you're a high school student, look at Macaulay, consider going to it and applying. Not only did I receive a full ride from Macaulay, but I received a significant amount of money from TAP and also Pell. Now with both of these in place, basically I got to go to college for free, and also I received money back from these financial assistance programs. I was able to pull some rough data from the CUNY website regarding my financials during my time there. I moved all this data to a financial spreadsheet so you can take a look as well. In my 4 years of attending Baruch College, I received $29K in financial aid and $22K in scholarships. Then I only paid $4.3K in out-of-pocket expenses when financial aid didn't come in time and I had to pay it first and upfront. Otherwise, when you run the numbers, I actually had $14.5K left over that was refunded to me for textbooks, for transportation, for really anything I wanted. On a high level, these numbers are a little bit rough just because sometimes these systems double count or the numbers are inaccurate. But I would say generally here it's a good ballpark for the amount of aid that I received and the money that I got back. Maybe without the scholarship, I would have received much less money back from the college. Unfortunately, since I wasn't big on financial literacy or budgeting, I don't really have the numbers in terms of how I spent this $14.5K. I just know that it probably was deposited to my bank account over the course of 4 years. A good portion of it probably is spent on textbooks, commuting, and just food, and also saved. You'll see that I saved a good chunk of that money. Whether it was smart to save that money versus investing it is a whole nother debate. After all my internships, after all 4 years of college and receiving both scholarships and financial aid, I had $8.8K left in my checking and savings account combined together. I acknowledge that my situation is a little bit unique. So many of these factors made such a giant contribution to allowing me to basically have no student loans and graduate with a positive net worth. And I want to repeat, this is not to brag and say, hey, I graduated with no student loans, I did it, so you can you. I'm not saying that. Maybe you can do it depending on where you are and what your situation looks like. And it's not true for everyone, but it's a possibility, right? If you are in New York City, then really consider looking into all these programs, right? If you're not in New York City, it might not make sense to you, especially if your public universities are much more expensive and there is no scholarship program that pays them in full. I just happen to live in New York City. I just happen to have access to one of the best universities that were also public. So I'm going to say right now, there's no special trick to have no college debt, right? You either work really hard or you get really lucky and the stars align when it comes to financial aid and scholarships. My case is the second one, and probably the first one as well, right? You have to work hard to keep those scholarships. Hopefully my transparency will give you some ideas about how you can reduce your expenses, or if you don't know about these financial aid programs, check them out.